Hey, Tuesday night edition, Wednesday morning edition of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. We got ourselves a jam-packed Tuesday night into Wednesday show, and we're going to cover a lot of ground today on today's show. Bottom line, this basketball stuff is not slowing down, but also for people who are new to the show, I actually do talk a lot of football. And so I do want to go ahead and talk a little bit of NFL draft, but quick rundown of what you need to know for today's show. Everybody come on in. As always, drop your questions. We will get to them momentarily, but today's show is pretty straightforward. So first off, Arkansas. John Calipari's making moves. Picked up another commitment on Monday, Carter Knox. He's got, I think, 3 to 4 visits lined up for later this week. So we're going to talk about who Cal has coming in, what you need to know, and why I think the news is going to start coming pretty fast and furious out of Fayetteville. One guy that we know is not following John Calipari, Jayden Quaintance, the 5-star center. We got word today that he's not going to Arkansas, will not take a visit. Then, in an interesting twist just about a half an hour ago, he canceled an in-home visit with Kentucky. Interesting recruitment. There's some speculation as to what might or might not be going on. So we will go ahead and discuss that. And then, as I said, a lot of you that are new to this show might not know, we talk a lot of college football on this show. And so with the NFL draft on Thursday, we will not be able to do a Thursday night show. I have family in town. So just want to put out a couple NFL draft hot takes. I watch a ton of college football. We cover a lot of college football on this show. You know, Torres has takes. And so we are going to discuss them all here. So everybody drop your questions. As always, we will get to them momentarily. Any super chats we will obviously prioritize. And I've mentioned it before, but this show is reaching just a staggering number of people. One, cannot thank you all enough for your support. Two, if you, your company, a company you work for, if you want to be part of the Aaron Torres podcast experience, the Aaron Torres media empire, we are taking advertisers both for the right now, for the fall when football will really ramp up. Feel free to hit me up, Aaron Torres, podcastquestions@gmail.com. Always taking advertisers. I'm here to tell you, we put up monster numbers, huge audience, especially across the South and Southeast SEC country. If you have a product that you want out there, please make sure to reach out to your boy, Torres. So with that said, that's the good stuff. That's the early stuff. But there is no more time to waste. It's 6 o'clock Eastern on a Tuesday night. News is coming fast and furious. There is no more time to waste. So let's go ahead and not waste that time and get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, it's funny because going back to Monday night's Aaron Torres pod, Sunday night's Aaron Torres pod into Monday, it was really funny because it felt like Kentucky fans were freaking out. Mark Pope, what's going on? We have no players. What's going on? They had Travis Perry and Colin Chandler. But then Sunday night into Monday, you get Amari Williams and you start to feel the momentum building with Kentucky. At the same time, it felt like probably 24 to 48 hours ago, Arkansas fans were saying the same thing about their new head coach, John Calipari. What's going on? Big Z committed a week ago. Calipari takes the job about 2 weeks ago. Where's our team? We need 5 guys to field the team to get on the court. Where are all the players coming from? Well, John Calipari got his second commitment on Monday, and it sure does feel to me like we could be getting a bunch more here in a short amount of time. So first of all, what do you need to know? What's going on with Calipari, and what is the speculation on what could come next? Well, first of all, as I just said, Monday night, we did get the second commitment of the John Calipari era, the first high school player in McDonald's All-American, Carter Knox. Okay, so this is a kid, first of all, we have talked about a lot. I remember dating back to that Sunday night, the crazy night in which John Calipari unofficially accepted the job. It didn't become official till that Tuesday or Wednesday. But we started talking about, okay, who are the players that could follow John Calipari to Arkansas? And the number one player I said right away was Carter Knox, 6'6", McDonald's All-American. And it was for all the reasons we discussed since then. And oh, by the way, the day after on that Monday of the national championship game, I remember saying, Go ahead and make the graphics right now. He is probably going to be one of the early Calipari commitments. He visits campus on Monday and he ends up committing. We did a reaction video, so I don't know that we need to spend like a ton of time breaking down the commitment here as much as what is potentially going to happen next for Arkansas. But with Carter Knox, listen, first of all, it was not a surprise because of his family's ties to both John Calipari and the current Arkansas staff, okay? We discussed this throughout the last couple weeks, but this was a kid whose brother played for John Calipari at Kentucky, and it's also worth noting his recruitment ended just a few weeks ago. I went back and looked it up. He actually committed the final day of the college hoops regular season when Kentucky wins at Tennessee. And when he committed, the final four in that group were Kentucky, Louisville, South Florida, where he's from originally. He's from Tampa. That's where the University of South Florida is, and the G League Ignite program. Well, the G League Ignite program no longer exists. Louisville fires Kenny Payne, but it was important to note that in many ways, the Knox family was maybe even closer to Kenny Payne than they were to John Calipari. I think if Kenny Payne had been on a little bit more stable ground at Louisville, Carter Knox might have ended up at Louisville. But instead, Kenny Payne gets fired. Kenny Payne ends up with John Calipari. And so it just makes a ton of sense for him to be heading to Arkansas. Now, in terms of what kind of player Arkansas is getting, I really like him. And you know what's really funny about this? And this is going to sound like a knock on Arkansas, but also, a knock on Calipari and what he did at the last stop. But I heard this stat today. Carter Knox is actually the 5th highest ranked recruit to commit to Arkansas in the recruiting rankings era. So it's funny because it's just a guy to Kentucky fans. They're so used to the success that Calipari has had on the recruiting trail. But this is a very important recruit for Arkansas going forward. He's 6'6". He's super athletic. He competes. He plays hard. I think he's really talented. I don't think he's quite as skilled as his brother Kevin Knox was. Kevin Knox, who played at Kentucky, was kind of a mid-range, 3-point guy. He couldn't really beat you off the dribble. He wasn't like an A++ athlete. I think Carter Knox is a little bit more athletic. Definitely needs to put some weight on his frame. But I think he has a chance to be really good, especially late this coming season at Arkansas when he gets to Arkansas. And so, listen, Calipari, the people want to criticize him. He didn't do this. He didn't do that. Well, one thing that he has always done really well, dating back to the Memphis days, is taking those young players that are maybe super talented, a little rough around the edges, in terms of the skill set or whatever. And by the end of the year, he always figures it out with them, right? I mean, go back to this past season at Kentucky. Justin Edwards struggled all year. Then all of a sudden, mid-February hits and Justin Edwards is like one of the, best players of the SEC. Rob Dillingham was great as a freshman. Now, not all of them hit. DJ Wagner struggled. He dealt with some injuries, though. But you go through the Calipari era. I've always used this as an example. Tyler Hero, his freshman year, was basically unplayable for like the first probably 6 weeks, 8 weeks of the season. And you start seeing him turn it on in January, into late January, into February. And by March, he was one of the best players in college basketball. I'm not saying that Carter Knox necessarily has Tyler Hero's skill set, but what I am saying is he's one of those guys that I could see early on. It takes him a minute. We're trying to figure it out. We don't really know what Arkansas's schedule is going to look like, by the way, this year, which I think is kind of interesting. And I think he could be struggle a little bit in SEC play, especially early. But I think as you go on, as he gets more comfortable, I think he could be one of the better players on this team going forward as we figure out what the team looks like. But this is a big commitment for Calipari. Needed him, need bodies, need talent. Calipari has always thrived with high upside guys, and this kid has as high of an upside as anybody in college basketball heading into next year. I really believe he has a chance to be really, really, really good, really, really, really late. And so because of it, this is a big-time commitment for John Calipari at Arkansas. At the same time, though, we're not just talking about this move specifically and for what it means to Arkansas, because the bottom line remains, let me tell you this, there is also a slew of information coming out on some Arkansas potential visits and potentially some difference makers for Arkansas as well. So we know that Big Z is committed. We know that Carter Knox is coming to Arkansas. By the way, if I called him Kevin Knox at any point in that segment, forgive me. I've done it a million times over the course of the last couple weeks. But we know Carter Knox is going. We know Big Z is going. By the way, as you can see on the scroller, make sure you're following our Torres on the Hogs account for all your late-breaking Arkansas news. By the way, the Big Pig Invasion shirts are selling very well as well. But what I want to do now is go ahead and look ahead, because I think Calipari over the next day or two, or probably, I would say probably week or so, I think this dude could go on a monster recruiting run with the Razorbacks. First off, the news that we got earlier in the day on Tuesday, Boogie Fland, 5-star guard, was committed to Kentucky, McDonald's All-American, asked out of his letter of intent. He's going to visit Arkansas on Wednesday night. And so to me, this feels like probably the next big piece of news that works out in Arkansas's favor. First off, in terms of his recruitment, it's actually been pretty quiet. Now, he said all the right things about, I'm opening things up and I'm going to look at all my options and all this and all that. But you start to look at the options, I don't know how good they are. He's from the Northeast. I don't think UConn, which initially recruited him out of high school, has much interest. I think they're pretty set with what they want to do in the backcourt. St. John's, I thought would be involved, but it doesn't feel like they are. And then you go to the ties that he has. Kentucky, listen, I'm not going to beat around the bush. It doesn't feel as though he's a priority for Mark Pope, which is fine. Mark Pope has to do what's best for him. So Kentucky feels out of the equation. His lead recruiter, Orlando Antigua, is now headed to Illinois. And I've just never believed that it makes sense for him to just go to Illinois with no ties to the school, no ties to the region, no ties to the head coach. I mean, I think that's a tough sell. Now, if Orlando Antigua can pull it off, it's incredible. But I just think that's going to be a tough sell for a kid who has no ties with Illinois, no ties to the Midwest, whatever. And so I think Arkansas is in pretty good shape. And this is another kid, 6'2", 6'3" guard, lead guard, can all three levels can score. He's a really good player who, again, I think you give him time, you allow him to get comfortable in that John Calipari system, in that John Calipari offense. That's a guy that I think could be really good by the end of this year. I don't think it's apples to apples with Rob Dillingham, because Rob Dillingham has like one-of-one elite speed and elite quickness. But I do think he's that kind of player who can fill that kind of role, depending on what John Calipari decides to do with this offense. Of course, remember, the guy who kind of ran the offense at Kentucky is not following him to Arkansas. He is actually, that coach is not following him to Arkansas. So Boogie Fland is on campus on Wednesday. I know that there was some Louisville buzz, but it feels like Arkansas is in pretty good shape with him. The other guy that became official on Tuesday as well, Billy Richmond, 4-star kid, was committed to Kentucky, asked out of his letter of intent. We found out on Tuesday that he will be visiting Arkansas tomorrow. I think it was Jamie Shaw from On3 was the first one to have it. If it was somebody else, I apologize. Don't want to make sure I get my facts right, whatever, okay? But I just bring it up because I look at the situation with Billy Richmond and I sit there and say, makes a lot of sense, in my opinion, for Billy Richmond to follow John Calipari to Arkansas. Billy Richmond, first of all, we did a Carter Knox commitment video on Monday night, quick reaction. Billy Richmond, Billy Richmond, his background is fascinating. So his dad played for John Calipari at Memphis. What was fascinating about it, though, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, John Calipari actually kicked him off the team at Memphis. There were some issues off the court. He kicks him off the team. And Billy Richmond's dad has basically said that changed my life as a man, made me grow up, made me get my priorities straight. I thank John Calipari for that. And so I just bring it up because I think the relationship is there. I think that he wants his son to play for John Calipari. And then the other thing is Billy Richmond Jr. is originally from Memphis and went up to high school, played in Camden, New Jersey. But he's from Memphis, and I'm not great with geography, but I know Memphis borders the state of Arkansas. And so would not surprise me at all if Billy Richmond, who is also visiting this week, is a quick commitment to Arkansas. And I think, again, we'll see that roster come together pretty quickly. Also worth noting, it's not just the high school players. It's actually also, on top of the high school players, Calipari's doing some work in the portal as well. So first off, Jonas Adu, I had been told earlier in the day that he will be on campus this week. I think there's a chance he could be on campus either as you're listening to this or in the upcoming days, minutes, moments, whatever. But that is the transfer from Tennessee. He was a very, very good player this past year at Tennessee. Averaged 11 points, 8 boards per game, just under 2 blocks. Now, listen, he's kind of more the back to the basket kind of guy. He's kind of everything's within 5 feet. He's not a guy that's going to step out and hit threes and, shoot 38% from 3-point land. But at the same time, he's a guy 6'11", certainly comfortable in the SEC. And I think if Arkansas were to make a move on him and have success in getting him, I actually think he matches up very nicely with Big Z and what those two guys could do on the same team together. Big Z is a guy who can play down low, but he can stretch the floor. Jonas Adu is a guy that plays down low. Both are very good shot blockers. I think Jonas Adu is a little bit of a better player overall. But I also don't think it changes the fact that I think that those two would be very good together if Calipari can close. Now, it's worth noting, as of right now, Jonas Adu, I would say, is more trending towards Baylor. We talked about Baylor on the show a few nights ago. Jeremy Roach committed during the show, and we kind of said, okay, it feels like there's more coming. I think it was Matt Norlander who had the tweet that said there's more big news coming for Baylor. But Jonas Adu did leave Baylor without committing over the weekend. He was visiting there. And so you do wonder if Calipari can make an impression, if you can get Jonas Adu to campus. Yes, he's played in the SEC, but it's a lot different playing a game in Fayetteville versus getting the full experience, the facilities, the restaurants, the campus, etc. So we'll keep an eye on Jonas Adu. Also, I'll say this, it feels like there's growing buzz that John L. Davis could be in play at Arkansas. He is, in my opinion, now that AJ Storr's committed, now that a couple other guys committed, I think that he might be the best player in the portal. This is a kid. He's a guard, played at Florida Atlantic, obviously was good enough to lead Florida Atlantic to the Final Four last year. This past season, 18 points, 6 rebounds per game, 41% shooting from 3. Now, I know that Kentucky's making a big push on him as well, but you look at John L. Davis, you look at what he is capable of, and you look at the fact, I said this the other day, and I think this is important. John L. Davis will be a 5th-year senior next year, okay? 6'4" guard, 18 points per game as a senior this past year at Florida Atlantic. And why I bring it up is he has 1 year left. He has 1 year left. He's made a Final Four. Obviously, look, the goal is to win a national championship anywhere you go. But at the same time, you basically have 1 year to prove to NBA teams that you are an NBA player. And so I just wonder, is that Cal's pitch? Hey, come here and be a different version of one and done. You only have a year. There is nobody literally better than me than at taking a guy and in 1 year turning him into a pro than I do. You could go through the names. You could go through the list. You don't need me to tell you about Jamal Murray and Tyrese Maxey and Devin Booker and all the guys that Cal has sent to the pros. Come here, be a one and done. You'll have the opportunity, ball in your hand, SEC, biggest stage in college basketball. I'm a huge brand in my own right. You're going to be on national TV, every opportunity, huge stage. Media will know you. So we'll see if that works out. And then just a couple other quick names on Arkansas. I do think Jordan Burks, who just hit the portal just a few days ago from Kentucky, was a freshman this past year. Didn't play a ton. He was kind of a late addition. He is in the portal. I believe there's a very good chance that he could follow John Calipari to Arkansas as well. I'll tell you this, 6'8", 6'9", lefty, but he played at Overtime Elite. And I will tell you, the OTE guys, Overtime Elite, that prep school in Atlanta, they believe he is an NBA player. Now, not everybody's a one and done, but they believe he has the size, the frame, the athleticism, the mental toughness to potentially be a player that one day plays in the NBA. So those are kind of the guys you got to watch out for with Arkansas, but John Calipari is certainly making his moves. Everybody go ahead, drop your questions in. We will get to them in a minute. By the way, I hope the chat isn't devolving into Arkansas fans and Kentucky fans arguing, although my guess is that's probably what is going on. But this is what I want to do. Producer Matt, let's take a quick break. We're going to come back. When we come back, I want to switch gears because this Jayden Quaintance story, he is one guy that is not following John Calipari to Arkansas. And this story took like several different turns over the course of the last 12 hours. So we're going to take a quick break, talk Jayden Quaintance, and then come back and take some of your questions. Quick break, as I just said. We'll be right back. Before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Gonna be back. So, first off, thank you to producer Matt. Did that little video for me yesterday. Great work there. If you have any questions on the merch store or anything like that, please feel free to always hit me up at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. With that said, do want to switch gears. And we just talked about all the guys that could be following John Calipari from Kentucky to Arkansas. Maybe a few that weren't even at Kentucky that could be going to Arkansas. What I want to do now is definitively talk about one guy that is absolutely not following John Calipari to Arkansas, and that is five-star center Jayden Quaintance, the top uncommitted player in high school basketball. All right, so if you've listened to this show over the last month, and thousands upon thousands of you have, Jayden Quaintance is the number one center in high school basketball, as I just said. Very interesting story, 16 years old. So he will enter college basketball next year as the youngest player in college basketball. And he's actually got to play 2 years of college basketball before he is eligible for the NBA draft. Bring it up because early in the process, I think it was probably last October, November, something like that, he does commit to the University of Kentucky. Kentucky gets him. He's committed to Kentucky. And then when John Calipari leaves for Arkansas, there's all sorts of buzz. Oh, is he going to be one of the guys that follows John Calipari to Arkansas? But over the last couple weeks, you've started to see maybe the recruitments open a little bit more than we thought. And on Tuesday afternoon, Eric Bossy, long time recruiting writer, broke the news that he will not be following John Calipari to Arkansas, and he is definitely not going to be a Razorback. So, of course, naturally, the big question is, what ends up coming next for Jayden Quaintance? There is a lot to peel back. So, first off, when he decommitted, and I think this has kind of become more commonplace over the last, couple hours, it does feel like this is maybe an NIL situation. I'm not here to begrudge a kid. I'm not here to begrudge a family, but you kind of read the whispers around the internet. And it does feel like this is probably going to be an NIL situation. I don't want to say highest bidder. That sounds demeaning. Listen, we all want to make money. And it does sound like, the family kind of put out a number to John Calipari that they said no. And so the family decided to move in a different direction. What I found interesting was I thought when I saw that news that I actually thought Kentucky could get back in the mix. Now, a lot of people would say, why Kentucky? Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Whatever. But here's the thing about Kentucky. First of all, we got news on Monday night that Mark Pope would do an in-home visit with Jayden Quaintance. Beyond that, and I think this is the important part that I haven't heard anybody else talk about except for me, is that there actually is a tie between the current Kentucky staff and Jayden Quaintance. Jayden Quaintance committed to Kentucky under Calipari over Missouri. I bring that up to very simply say this. You know who else was in the mix until the end? G League Ignite. And this is the thing I don't think Kentucky fans, and it's not a knock, it's just a reality, have fully wrapped their heads around. Jason Hart, you're looking at what he did at USC. You're looking at what he did as a college basketball coach. Here's the thing about Jason Hart, though. As the guy who ran G League Ignite, you know who was doing all the recruiting for them? It was Jason Hart. Whenever you saw a player is visiting G League Ignite, is touring G League Ignite, you know who's showing them the facility? You know who's showing them how he plans on using them, how they fit in with the program? It was Jason Hart. And so while G League Ignite has shut down, Jason Hart is now the associate head coach at Kentucky under Mark Pope. There is still a relationship there. And so I do believe that Kentucky can get back into the mix on Jaden Quaintance. It's just a question of whether they want to or not. Now, there was supposed to be, as I said a minute ago, a Monday in-home visit or Tuesday in-home visit. That was apparently canceled like an hour before we came on air here on a Tuesday night on the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. Now, the insinuation seems to be Kentucky is going in a different direction. I saw that they will get a visit from Great Osabor, the transfer from Utah State, the Mountain West Player of the Year. But I don't think this necessarily means that the recruitment is over. I think it could mean that the recruitment is over. But I just bring it up to very simply say that if Mark Pope wants to push his chips in the middle, if it is an NIL thing and he's willing to pay up, if he believes in Jayden Quaintance, there is the relationship there. Jason Hart, as I've told you, is a great recruiter, has great relationships with all of these kids. And even though the visit was canceled on Tuesday night, it doesn't mean that the recruitment is over. Although it does seem to me that at least for right now, probably he is not a priority for Kentucky. And listen, every coach has to do what's best for them. And if the asking price is what people are reporting it is, and again, I'm not knocking the kid, then the question becomes, is there better ways to allocate your resources? If that is the case, it appears as though John Calipari has gone in a different direction, and it appears as though Mark Pope will be going in a different direction as well. So then the question becomes, who else would be in the mix? Does feel like if Kentucky's completely out, that it's coming down to two schools. One, we talked about this on a previous show. Louisville seems to be a player in this recruitment. Should they be? Should they not be? I don't know. It is worth noting that Jayden Quaintance, one of Pat Kelsey's assistants who followed him from College of Charleston to Louisville. Before he was at College of Charleston, do you know where he was? He was coaching at Jayden Quaintance's old high school. And so it makes sense that there is a tie, and it makes sense that Louisville could be in the mix. Now, the big question is a couple things for Pat Kelsey. If it's an NIL deal, do they want to get involved? Do they want to pay what they have to pay? Is it worth it for them? The counter to it, though, is a couple things. One, if you're Pat Kelsey, that is a major splash. Top 10 prospect, number one center in America. And as I said, I think this is an important part that people are skipping over. You get 2 years of this kid in college basketball. He is not yet eligible for the NBA draft in 2025. He will not be eligible. He is too young. And so you bring him in, you develop him. Obviously you bring him in to be a star. You bring him in to play right away. But at the same time, it does not change the fact that you will have him for 2 years. And so I think that's playing a role for Pat Kelsey. There are ties to Louisville. And then I think the other thing is it's just a splashy thing. Top 10 prospect in America. You have the chance to bring him in. You have the opportunity to take a former Kentucky commitment. And I think that becomes the signature of the early Pat Kelsey era. That becomes the signature of that's the big splash. That's the big recruitment. That was the guy that we wanted. And that was the guy that kind of sets us up and basically says like, oh, we're back. Oh, we're Louisville. Oh, we're one of the top programs in college basketball. And guess what? We ain't backing down from nobody. We can recruit with anybody. We just brought in a top 10 McDonald's All-American prospect that a lot of other people wanted. So it'll be interesting to see if they stay in the mix. And then finally, I think it's worth noting very quickly, if you've been following the tea leaves on this, it does appear as though Memphis is in the mix as well. Now, there's differing opinions on just how much Memphis is actually involved. Are they being used as some sort of leverage? That's another conversation for another day. But what I do know is two quick things on Penny Hardaway. One, with Penny Hardaway, with Memphis, money is not an issue. Remember, they just got that $25 million check from FedEx. If you saw that story, FedEx has donated $25 million towards Memphis's NIL. That's for both football, basketball, non-revenue sports, etc. But it's worth noting, Penny Hardaway, to pull the Johnny Manziel, he's got funny money to play with right now. And the other thing about Penny Hardaway, you can like him, you cannot like him. I'm kind of at the point where I do think we're getting to the underachieving portion of his career. You can disagree if you want. Back-to-back tournaments 2 years ago, had him in the top 10 this year. They completely fell apart. But Penny Hardaway, whether you like him or not, he is always going to bet on talent and basically say, bring me the talent, I'll figure it out. Did it a few years ago when he brought in Amani Bates and Jalen Duren in August. They both reclassified in August. Jalen Duren was great. Amani Bates was not. Remember, he tried to bring in Mikey Williams, had Mikey Williams committed when nobody else wanted him, and basically only got rid of him because he had to. The school basically was like, this kid cannot be involved in our athletic department while he's got, some serious court cases going on. How about this if we're talking about Penny Hardaway? How about this past season when they have a top 10 team in the country, everything's rolling, and what does he decide to do? Decides to bring in Naquan Tomlin from the outside. Decides to say, you know what? I don't have a 7-footer. I want a 7-footer. I'm going to need a 7-footer. And he blew up the chemistry of that entire locker room because everything was going great. Top 10 team in the country. They bring in Naquan Tomlin. They were never the same. So I just bring it up to say this is going to be fascinating to see how it all unfolds because Jayden Quaintance is incredibly talented. Is it an NIL thing? Is it an Arkansas is just trying to get older thing? And let me put it this way. I think there are just so many variables to consider right now. Again, is Arkansas just trying to get older or was it an NIL ask that they didn't like? Is Kentucky going after veterans? By the way, just because the home visit was canceled, does that mean that Kentucky's out of the picture or not? By the way, Louisville's involved. Memphis is involved. Can somebody else get involved? When you have players that talented and they're available, somebody will get involved. And I think that's the other thing to factor in here too. I'm guessing there's a lot of schools that probably felt like, you know what? He's following Calipari to Arkansas. There's it's not even worth making a phone call. Well, fast forward, maybe now they do think it's worth a phone call. So it is an absolutely fascinating situation. I cannot wait to see how it all unfolds. And I am riveted to see where he ends up because he is a talent. Now, again, we'll see what ends up happening, all that good stuff. But boy, oh boy, oh boy, what an interesting story. Jayden Quaintance has decommitted from Kentucky. He will not follow Calipari to Arkansas, and we'll see what happens next. Producer Matt, before we get to some NFL draft stuff, so really quickly, for people who don't know, we talk a ton of college football on this show. We have been so immersed in college basketball in the portal. We haven't had time to talk football at all the last couple of weeks, but we're going to start to probably talk a little bit of football here in just a minute, and probably talk a little bit more football as we get into the summer. Because before we know it, next week is May already. It's going to be May. We can finally sleep. We sleep in May. Then it'll be June, and then all of a sudden we'll have media days, and things will really ramp up. So before we get to football, though, Matt, do we have any basketball-related questions that we can get to? I'm going to pour myself a glass of water, by the way, so while you pull up any questions. Richie, great question. Richie asks, will you visit Bud Walton Arena again? Richie, are you inviting me, buddy? Are you inviting me, pal? Yes, of course I'm going to visit Bud Walton again. As I was thinking about that today. First of all, I had a great experience in Fayetteville. And one thing I will say, let me say this. I'm going to piss off a lot of people when I say this. Kentucky fans, can you stop anytime anything good happens doing the whole, Carter Knox, good luck, terrible coaching, it's never going to work? Or I saw a lot of this. Well, Jayden Quaintance not going to Arkansas is proof that Kentucky is not Arkansas, that Fayetteville is not Lexington. I've been to Lexington, I've been to Fayetteville. They're both beautiful cities, beautiful campuses with a lot to offer an 18-year-old kid. Now, Kentucky has a new head coach. Be happy. Kentucky has a lot to offer. They always will. As long as we play college basketball, Kentucky's going to have a lot to offer, but Arkansas is going to have a lot to offer too. And so I loved my trip to Fayetteville. I will absolutely be back. I'm in touch all the time. I text John Neighbors basically like every day. We're basically texting. Curtis Wilkerson, I love all the Phil Elson, Wes Moore was on this show, Ty Richardson. I love those guys. So yeah, I'll get back. We got to see what the schedule looks like, what Cal does in the out of conference. Obviously, this year, the SEC ACC Challenge will be a road game, so you won't have a Duke or a Carolina coming to town. But listen, I would love to get back and love to be part of the Big Pig Invasion. I just had a blast. It's funny. I'll tell you this really quickly, too. I was actually watching ESPN this weekend. They went from one of the NBA playoff games to the Arkansas softball game. And I was like, I walked by that stadium like 6 months ago. So, yes, I would love to come to Fayetteville, love to come to Bud Walton again. See if there's anything else. I think it's just a lot of bickering between fan bases. Jacob. So Jacob actually just asked me about something that I've been thinking about a lot. And that is about Liam McNeely. So Liam McNeely is the 5-star McDonald's All-American that visited UConn over the last couple days. And literally, if you were watching the stream, I keep checking my phone, and it's mostly just my buddies that UConn fans, but mostly my buddy UConn fans are basically texting me like, Torres, when are we going to hear the news? And so I bring it up because I'm a little, as a UConn guy, I'm a little bit concerned that we did not get Liam McNeely news today. The bottom line is, listen, when you have these kids on campus, you want to get commitments and you want to get them as quick as possible. And so the fact that he left campus, now I know that Jamie Shaw, the recruiting writer, did say that as of right now, he just put in a crystal ball within the last couple hours for Liam McNeely to UConn. Maybe that's the case, and maybe it happens tonight. Maybe it happens tomorrow. It would be fitting if it happened right after we went off air. That seems to happen a lot around here. But at the same time, I will say, as a UConn fan, I'm a little worried about Liam McNeely because you let him get off campus, you let him take other visits. That's a scary proposition because one, anytime you have a new experience, it's going to put more stuff in your head, whether it's a Kansas visit, whether it's a Kentucky visit, maybe an Arkansas visit. But the other thing, I'll just say this, and I think UConn fans probably know it, is that the bottom line is that, UConn does not play the NIL games that everybody else does. Dan Hurley has said often, he said, listen, we never want NIL to be the sole reason why a kid picks us. But we also don't want to be so far behind that we're not even competitive. And so, listen, if Liam McNeely leaves, and let's say he goes to Kentucky, where we know Mark Pope got a $4 million check the day that he took the job. If he goes to Arkansas, where we know money is basically unlimited, we know that Bill Self has been planning for 2025 since before the 2024 season even ended. Now, all of a sudden, you get into a situation where maybe NIL does come into play. Maybe he visits somewhere else. Maybe they put an offer in front of him that he can't refuse. So I am a little nervous as a UConn guy that if Liam McNeely hasn't committed, is there something to worry about? We will see what happens over the next couple hours and over the next couple days. We'll see if he sets up any more visits. I'm not worried yet. Now, Jacob did ask specifically about the possibility of a Liam McNeely, Kobe Brea backcourt. Did a little transfer portal update video the other day. And what I will say about it is this, is that Kobe Brea, I think the three are going to be UConn, Kentucky, and North Carolina. North Carolina needs shooting. Kentucky needs bodies. UConn needs backcourt guys. Duke, they got a lot of guys right now. They're mostly freshmen. The guards coming back. I don't know that fits. And I think Kansas just has too many backcourt guys as well. So my hunch is it's going to be one of those three. But to answer Jacob's question specifically, I do not think as of right now that if Liam McNeely were to commit to UConn, it would mean that they can't take Kobe Brea. By the way, your boy Torres doesn't break a lot of news, but Aiden Mahaney, the guard from St. Mary's, very friendly with his AAU program, West Coast Elite. And they told me that as of last night, the plan is for Aiden Mahaney to take a visit to UConn as well. So it feels like they're looking for two players in this cycle, probably Liam McNeely and a portal guy. By the way, did get one more question before we actually get to a little bit of football. Somebody just texted me and asked about the shirts, the Hope and Pope shirts, okay? So I'm hoping to pick, first of all, the order was so freaking big, we didn't have enough at the beginning. And so I bring it up because, yes, you can see the Hope and Pope shirts there. They're beautiful. You can get them at AaronTorresOnline.com. Hope and Pope, but also the Big Pig Invasion shirts, is that I'm hoping to pick them up from the printer either Wednesday or Thursday. Bottom line is the orders for both were like insane. And so we ran out very quickly. So the hope is to pick them up this week. The hope is to get them in the mail this week. If you ordered them, I have not forgotten about you. I haven't taken your money. I don't want your money. I just want to get you a cool shirt. So the hope is to get them. The hope, you hope and Pope. I hope in my printer that we could get those shirts by the end of this week and get them out to you. You can always hit me up. No doubt about it. And when it does go in the mail, you will get a tracking number and all that. So I do appreciate everybody's support. All right. Do want to switch gears really quickly because unfortunately the comment section has just turned vicious between Kentucky and Arkansas fans arguing over stuff. So what I want to do is switch gears. And what I want to say is this really quickly. If you're new to this show, and when I say that we literally have thousands of people who are new to this show just this month, we have added thousands of subscribers. We've had hundreds of thousands of views, okay? I only bring it up to very simply say this. We actually talk a lot of college football, and I hate to brag, but I think I'm as good and as entertaining as anybody in college football, just like I am in college basketball. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you don't like Torres. Maybe you don't care if I talk football. But we talk a lot of college football. And this week, what's interesting is this. NFL draft is here. Now, normally I would love to do a post-game kind of reaction show to the draft on Thursday night, but I do have family in town. As crazy as it sounds, yes, I'm not just producing content 365 days around the clock. And so we won't be able to react to round one of the draft on Thursday. We'll probably do a Thursday afternoon show before the draft starts to get you your Friday show. But basically what I wanted to just do is very quickly, I just want to share a couple of my thoughts on the NFL draft. And what I think is going to happen is pretty straightforward, is we're basically going to use this as fodder for Aaron right, Aaron wrong. I've gotten a lot of stuff right through the years on the NFL draft. Zach Wilson, Trey Lance. I was wrong on Mac Jones. Thought he would be pretty good. But I have about 4, 5, 6 NFL draft hot takes. Just want to spit them out really quick. First of all, let me start by saying this. The Caleb Williams, what's the right word? Anger, vitriol. I think vitriol is the word I was looking for. I think it is some of the most unjust and unfounded vitriol that I have ever seen. Now, to be clear, I do understand. I get that, listen, he was not perfect this year. USC went 7-5. And I get that he sort of is a lightning rod. He does the nails painted. He does the, some stuff that's a little bit different. And I get that if you're not a USC fan, you could be turned off. Obviously, NIL was a big factor for him. He was in TV commercials, whatever, this, that. But there are a couple things that stand out with Caleb Williams. One, he has always been the best prospect. I feel like the last 2 months, because there's no conversation to have. It's almost like, you know what the Caleb Williams situation reminds me of? It reminds me of the UConn basketball run to the national championship. You know UConn's going to win. You know they're by far the best team. There's only so many things you can say before it kind of gets repetitive and boring. Oh, they're the best team in the country. Dan Hurley's the best coach in the country. They're better than last year. This is a dynasty. They're a blue blood. There's only so many things you can say, and I feel like that's what happened with Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is number one. He's going number one. He's always been going number one. And so because of it, now everyone's just piling on because there's nothing new to say about him. But when you look at Caleb Williams, these are the criticisms. Oh, he had a down year this year at USC. Yes, he had a down year this year at USC, okay? But keep in mind, terrible offensive line. Statistically, one of the worst defenses in major college football. His down year, this was his down year, 69% completion percentage, 30 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 9.5 yards per completion. By the way, in his 2 years at USC, 72 touchdown passes, 10 interceptions. That is the guy that everybody has tried to tear down and say that he's terrible. Now, again, there's some off the field stuff. It looks like he has a little bit of kind of arrogance to him, whatever. My thing is, I don't really care about that. Can you spin the ball or not? You can. And the other thing that really kind of bothered me is I don't like the conversation about when he went into the stands and cried with his mom. And it was funny because we talked about it on the show briefly, but you can go back into the archives. I never made that a big thing because what was interesting about that, I was on air on Fox Sports Radio when that happened, okay? And when that happened, the context matters. It wasn't just, oh, he's a crybaby, he's crying in his mom's arms. That was the Washington game. Why was that important? It was because it was a game where he threw for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. USC put up 42 points, and they lost by 10 at home. And so why was he crying? It is because he literally left everything he had on the field, and his defense let him down time and time and time again. That was also the game, by the way, in which USC was eliminated from everything. They lose the first game to Notre Dame. It's okay. You could still be in conversation for anything. You lose to Utah on the walk-off field goal. Well, you could still win the Pac-12 championship. When you lose to Washington, your season's over. You're playing for pride. That's all it is. And so forgive him. He's getting the crap kicked out of him. He has no stars at the wide receiver position. Brennan Rice is probably going to be a 3rd, 4th round pick. What do you want him to do? He's emotional. He's exhausted. He's getting the crap kicked out of him. So I have no problem with what it is, and I think he is going to be a really good pro. Now, I'm not the X's and O's guy. I don't have all the answers as to what Chicago's going to do. I do think part of it, yes, he needs a good play caller. Yes, Matt Eberflus is on the hot seat. Yes, we will see what ends up happening with the Chicago Bears and with that organization. But I think he's super talented. I think he's by far the best, and I think we're just nitpicking him because we have nothing else to talk about. Number 2 NFL draft hot take. By the way, I know y'all love football. I know y'all love college football and the NFL draft. Drop your hot takes in the comments. We'll get to them as well. My number 2 NFL draft hot take. I think the conversation about J.J. McCarthy I think it's missing the biggest piece, okay? So everyone's talking about J.J. McCarthy. Oh, he's not very good. Look at, they never had to throw the football. All they did was run the ball. All they did was play defense. They have a million guys that are going to get drafted. J.J. McCarthy, he's terrible. And my whole thing is J.J. McCarthy's the only quarterback that I don't have a strong opinion about, but I also think we are talking about him wrong, and let me explain why. Everybody's caught up on, well, the O-line was so good, and the run game was so good, and the defense was so good. Okay, that's totally fair. But here's what nobody's talking about. JJ, you know how Greg McElroy a few weeks ago was like, Caleb Williams dealt with adversity, never dealt with adversity. It's like Caleb Williams dealt with a crazy adversity. You know who else dealt with crazy adversity? J.J. McCarthy dealt with crazy adversity. What do I mean by that? How could he deal with adversity? He went 15-0, won a national championship. Well, if you'll remember, the first 3 games of the year, his head coach was not there. Then, oh, by the way, the biggest 3-game stretch of the season leading into the postseason against Penn State, the number 1 defense in college football. Wasn't Bama, wasn't Georgia, wasn't Tennessee. It was Penn State. Guess what happened to Michigan? They flew to Happy Valley not knowing who was going to coach them in that game. And Sharon Moore went from being the play caller to the play caller and head coach about an hour before kickoff. Remember, that was the day there was the subpoena, there was this, there was that, there was whatever. And it was like, They didn't know who their head coach was going to be on the road against the top 5 team and the number one defense in college football. So save me. Oh, by the way, Ohio State, a few weeks later, you go in there. Your play caller is also your head coach. And so when we talk about J.J. McCarthy, I don't know if he's going to be good. I don't know if he's not. But can someone besides me put out the context that, oh, by the way, in 6 games, in half of the regular season, he did not have his head coach on the sidelines, and that he was significantly better when Jim Harbaugh, the head coach, was there, and when Sharon Moore could just focus on play calling? Because I feel like I'm the only one talking about that, and I don't know why. So that's my hot take number 2. We got to have a real conversation about J.J. McCarthy. By the way, you know what else we got to have a real conversation about? The wide receiver group. Because I've said this, I don't feel like it's as much of a hot take as it was a month ago, but I've said since the season ended, I think Malik Nabers is the best wide receiver in this draft. I'm not a scout. I'm not Todd McShay. I'm not Mel Kiper. I'm just telling you what I see with my eyes. And what happened with LSU this year was so fascinating because remember, LSU was an interesting team. They get destroyed on night 1 against Florida State, okay? We kind of forget about them. Then they lose a couple weeks later to Ole Miss. They take their second loss before the end of September, and we completely stop paying attention to them for all of October. Then we kind of start paying attention for the Bama game. They get beat by Bama. Then we start paying attention late in the year because Jaden Daniels was on his way to the Heisman. But in the process, nobody was paying that close attention to LSU on a national scale because they weren't really playing for anything from about mid-September on, late September. And so you weren't watching Malik Nabers unless you're a college football diehard or an LSU fan. Now, some of you might have been watching him, but I mean the people that cover this stuff. But look at what Malik Nabers did this year. 89 catches, 1,600 yards. 14 touchdowns in 13 games, played in a bowl game, by the way, which I like. I'm old school. If your team's playing, you should be there. That's just me. 18 yards per completion. Size. Well, he does have great size, but speed, fearless over the middle. Listen, Jaden Daniels won that Heisman as much because of Malik Nabers as anything. Also because Jaden Daniels is awesome. We'll get to him in a minute. But I've always liked Malik Nabers. I believe he's the best wide receiver in the draft. Listen, I like Marvin Harrison, and it's hard to judge Marvin Harrison because his quarterback play was so bad. Shout out Kyle McCord. You've probably forgotten about that name. He's at Syracuse now. And Marvin Harrison has all the tools, 6'3", super fast. Obviously, he's polished. His dad played in the NFL. We all know that. But I love Malik Nabers. I might be getting myself a Malik Nabers jersey depending on where he ends up because he's my favorite player in the draft. I've said since day one, I think he's my favorite receiver in this draft. That has become a little bit more common right now. But I do expect ultimately Marvin Harrison to be the first one off the board. A couple other draft takes here to talk about. First one. So my big take, I think the one thing that I do think that I think is being overly discussed that I don't think is going to happen. So it's funny, right? If you Google NFL mock drafts, it's all these mock drafts where whoever, Daniel Jeremiah or Joel, we're going to have this team trade this pick and this team do that. There's a lot of smoke about the New York Football Giants trading or drafting a quarterback at number 6, potentially even trading up into that top 3. The thought being Daniel Jones, he's not really the future, last year of his contract, whatever. I'm just here to say I don't buy it. Listen, you follow sports long enough, every program, every organization has an identity, right? Alabama football under Nick Saban was well put together, organized, disciplined. USC under Lincoln Riley, high flying, throw the ball, don't play defense. UConn basketball, disciplined, beat you up, whatever. Well, the New York Giants, their whole thing is all about, their whole organization is all about basically being pretty conservative. Like they move slow. They overpay guys. They leave guys in positions of power longer than they should. They're not a reactive organization. The Carolina Panthers fire somebody every week. Okay. A head coach, a coordinator, or whatever. New York Giants don't really do that. Remember that Eli Manning, he was some sort of consecutive start streak, and they probably played him a year longer than they should have because it was just we can't not let Eli start. Then they draft Saquon Barkley when they have no one else around him. And it's like, why are you drafting a running back at number 3 when you have no help for him? And so when I look at the Giants, they're going to pay Daniel Jones like $40 million this year. I just don't buy that they are going to bring someone in with a top 5 pick to either back up Daniel Jones or send Daniel Jones to the bench with a $40 million a year contract. Now, again, I'm not saying that's what I would do, but I just don't believe that, in my opinion, that is the right move to make. And so that's my hot take number 3, or number 4, I guess it would be, is I don't think the Giants are making a move. I'll say this. I could see the Chargers making a move. We know the Chargers situation. Jim Harbaugh's there. Listen, I think he is as fired up as I can ever remember him. They love Justin Herbert. They don't need O-line help. They don't need a quarterback. I could see them trading back. The Jets, I'll be curious. There's a lot of buzz that if Brock Bowers falls to them at 10, that they would take Brock Bowers. I tend to think they're still going O-line, but I'll tell you what, I've talked to a lot of people in football that are like, listen, Aaron Rodgers, you got to win with him this year, 2-year contract. He's always on the verge of retiring. Go get him another weapon. If it's a Brock Bowers, if it's a Rome Odunze, if it's a Malik Neighbors, if he falls that far, we'll see what happens. Finally, the only other real hot take that I have, I do think Jayden Daniels is QB2. Now, by the way, I don't think he's QB1 because that's kind of a take right now. But listen, I have all the same questions about Drake May that you guys do. Drake May regressed this year, okay? And one thing I always do worry about. Now, in defense of Drake May, his offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, left before this past season. Phil Longo is an elite play caller, went to Wisconsin, did not stay for Drake May's final year. And Drake May struggled this year. Went from 38 touchdowns and 7 picks to 24 touchdowns and 9 picks. His completion percentage dropped. And so I just bring it up because part of it is probably due to the offensive coordinator leaving. But at the same time, listen, I'm like the rest of you. I tune in every single week to see what all the hype was about, to see what all the buzz was about, to see what all the excitement was about. I just didn't see it. By the way, final 3 games, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. That included a loss to Clemson, that included a loss to NC State, a double overtime win over Duke. You know, his best game was against Campbell, an FCS school. I have my worries like everybody else, but I don't worry about Jayden Daniels. Listen, I'll say this about Jayden Daniels. When he went to LSU, I didn't like the move. I didn't like it from LSU's perspective. I sat there and said, this guy's, Brian Kelly's going to be behind the 8 ball because he trusted Jayden Daniels. What I don't think I realized at the time was how chaotic that situation at ASU was. Arizona State is a disaster. They just got hit with penalties, but we know Herm Edwards, 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out. He had 3 different offensive coordinators, but I did not think he was going to be this good. 40 touchdowns this year, 3,800 yards passing. And I know he had a lot of weapons at LSU, but also LSU was a little bit USC-ish in that their defense was so bad, the offense had to be great every single night. You go through all of the games that Jayden Daniels played, okay? We talked about that. We talked about the Ole Miss loss. 55-49 was the final score. They beat Missouri 49-39. They lose to Alabama. They beat Florida. That was the game where he had basically the best game I've ever seen a quarterback play. That was the game where he accounted for over 600 yards of total offense, 372 yards passing, 234 yards rushing. But Florida still put up 35 points. By the way, A&M, final game of the season, they fired Jimbo Fisher. Elijah Robinson's the head coach. Still put up 30 points with whatever it was, the 4th or 5th string quarterback by that point. And so I remember saying with Jayden Daniels, because people said, how can you win the Heisman if you have 3 losses? And I said, well, they'd probably have 5 or 6 if it wasn't for Jayden Daniels. They would have lost that Missouri game. They could have lost earlier, they could have lost potentially to Florida. They could have lost a couple other games throughout the schedule. So I love Jayden Daniels. And I think the other thing with Jayden Daniels, listen, he's getting a lot of Lamar comparisons. I don't love it. I don't love comparing any players to potentially all-time greats. I don't love comparing Caleb Williams to Patrick Mahomes. I don't love comparing basketball players to a young LeBron James. So I don't love the Lamar Jackson comparisons, but I do think it's worth noting. Jayden Daniels rushed for 1,100 yards. He was like the 2nd or 3rd leading rusher in the SEC as a quarterback. Forget the passing, forget 40 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, 72% completion percentage. He was like the 2nd leading rusher in the SEC. I found it interesting. Jalen Milroe from Alabama, who we all agreed is like this elite rushing prospect. Is this elite rushing prospect? Guess what? Jaden Daniels had like twice as much rushing yardage. Jaden Daniels had, I think it was Jalen Milroe finished with like 600 yards rushing. Jaden Daniels finished with about 1,100 yards. And so yeah, I like Jaden Daniels a lot. I would take him at number 2. Don't know what the Patriots are going to do. They are a disaster. And we'll see what happens from there. So those are my hot takes. I don't buy the Caleb Williams, misinformation smear campaign. I do like Malik Neighbors over Marvin Harrison. I do think JJ McCarthy I just think, I don't know if he's overrated, underrated, properly rated. I do think we are having the wrong conversation about him. I like Jaden Daniels over Drake May, and I don't think the Giants draft a quarterback. Producer Matt, I asked for some hot takes in the chat. Pop up anything else that we have. By the way, about the shirts, again, I know we got a couple questions about the shirts. If you missed it, the order was so much bigger than I anticipated. We are going to get Pressure Washing by Sterling said, thank you for the Pope up shirt. Thank you for the Pope shirt update. Never doubted you, LOL. Pressure Washing from Sterling. Thank you, man. Yeah, no, listen, like I said, I'm not here to steal $24.99 from you guys and girls. You guys work way too hard. I appreciate your support way too much. The order was just bananas. And so, like I said, if you missed it, if you've ordered a Hope and Pope shirt, a Woodson shirt, a Big Pig Invasion shirt, hoping to have them out in the mail by the end of this week. Printer is working his butt off. We got way more orders than I anticipated, and they're still coming in. So thank you all. Did ask for any football hot takes. So do we have any draft hot takes? Drafts is now 24 hours away. Okay, Nate McGrew. This is great. Let's talk football. Producer Matt, this feels so good. We haven't talked football in so long. Screw the transfer portal. Let's talk football. Okay, so this is great. Nate McGrew says, hot take, Cowboys should draft Rattler with their first to get the 5th year. So I am going to tell you this. There are 2 football takes. I feel like I'm like fight on USC here that I have been so right on. It's like boggles my mind. So after the Cowboys lost in the playoffs, I believe it was 2021. First off, I said, don't pay Dak. Okay. This is going back. You could find it on Fox Sports Radio 4 or 5 years ago. When Dak signed the previous extension, I said, do not sign Dak. He is not a franchise quarterback. You cannot win a Super Bowl with him unless everything is perfect. But when you pay him, you have to get rid of pieces. And I remember saying it at the time, don't re-sign him. And I still wonder, who is going to be the team that just says, no, we're not giving our guy a big contract. The crazy contract should go to Lamar Jackson, to Josh Allen, to Joe Burrow. But look at what happened with everybody else. Jared Goff got traded. He was only good after he got traded. Dak has not lived up to it. Tua just signed that crazy contract. They're going to regret it. You go on and on down the list. Sorry, producer Matt, who's a Dolphins fan, but you guys are going to regret that Tua contract. But I just bring it up because I said to Dak, don't sign the contract. But you know what my craziest take was? When they lost to the 49ers not 2 seasons ago. So they lost to the Packers this year, got destroyed at home. Year before, they lost to the 49ers on the road. The year before that, so that would have been the fall of 21, early 22, they lost to the 49ers at home. That was that weird game where they're driving and they couldn't spike the ball in time. And I said on this show, you could find it in the archives. This was one of my great takes of all time. I said, you need to fire Mike McCarthy. I think it was only year 2. And you need to go pay Nick Saban $25 million a year, or $30 million a year, or $50 million a year to get him to be your head coach. Now, at the time he was at Alabama, we didn't know he was going to retire. But my argument is that you basically had a 2-year window starting 2 seasons ago to win with Dak when Micah Parsons, when CeeDee Lamb, when all these guys were on rookie contracts. And once you pay all those guys, all of your leverage is gone. And so basically, Nick Saban at the time was 69, 70, 71 years old, whatever he was. I said, you have a 2-year window to win a Super Bowl because all your best players outside of Dak are on rookie contracts. Well, guess what? They keep Mike McCarthy because Jerry's afraid to make any major moves. And what happens? Lose to the 49ers 2 years ago, lose to Green Bay this year, and then this offseason, they've had to get rid of everybody. And so I think the Cowboys are screwed. I think it's interesting that they refuse to extend Dak, at least at this point. And Nate says, go ahead and draft Spencer Rattler. I love it. Dak is not the future. He's not the answer. I'll say this for Spencer Rattler. I was anti Spencer Rattler in the Oklahoma years. I think that guy's a warrior, man. He got the crap kicked out of him in South Carolina, was basically playing with nobody. His first year, everybody was hurt. Juice Wells was the wide receiver that got hurt. And so it's like, I think he's a warrior. Listen, I don't think he's going to go ahead of the Michael Penixes, obviously Caleb, whatever. I like Spencer Rattler a lot. I would draft him. Almost like in basketball, we say draft and stash. I would draft him, stash him somewhere, let him back him up for a year. But never forget, he was the number one recruit in America. You can criticize Lincoln Riley for whatever his defense is. Lincoln Riley doesn't miss on quarterbacks. Didn't work at Oklahoma. I thought he showed guts at South Carolina. And I will tell you, the draft people are saying, like, this kid could be moving up the draft boards on draft night. I think we might have one or two more. By the way, if you have a draft hot take, feel free to drop it in. Everybody was so angry when I was talking Calipari a minute ago, but the draft is coming up Thursday. If you have any hot takes, feel free to drop them in. This is great. Counts says hot take. No running back should be drafted until round 3. So I don't fundamentally disagree. I mean, I do think there are unique situations, like if you somehow have a high draft pick and you're one piece away, like when the Cowboys drafted Zeke, I had no problem with it. I think they were, what was it? They had won the division 2 years before. Then Dak got hurt. They didn't have a backup quarterback, and so they ended up with like the 3rd pick. I have no problem with that, but in general, I tend to agree with you. You know what my new take is, by the way, on draft stuff? Everybody talks about how valuable a quarterback is on a rookie contract. Let me take it a step further. I think the second most valuable thing in football right now, first most valuable thing, a quarterback on a rookie contract. Second most valuable thing, I think, is a wide receiver on a rookie contract. Let me explain. It's because we talk about the quarterbacks and how you can build around them. You shouldn't be paying wide receivers big money. It doesn't work out. Devontae Adams, Raiders are a disaster. By the way, I like the Raiders under Antonio Pierce. That's another conversation for another day. Miami Dolphins, you're paying Tyreek a bunch of money. Now you pay Tua. You got to get rid of the Christian Wilkinses of the world. And so I just bring it up because I was thinking about this, is whether it's Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas from LSU, Marvin Harrison. Last year, most years, there are wide receivers that can step in and play right away. Garrett Wilson doesn't even have a good quarterback. He's awesome. And so I just bring it up because I do think there is some value to having wide receivers on a rookie contract. You don't want to overpay them. Trade A.J. Brown. Listen, Eagles, I get it. You're trying to help Jalen Hurts, but I think the Titans were better off not paying A.J. Brown, even though it obviously didn't work out. They drafted Treylon Burks. Speaking of Arkansas, we were just talking Hogs and Calipari a minute ago. But I do think there is something to the idea of having wide receivers on rookie contracts. I think that is a little bit undervalued. By the way, just checking social media really quick, making sure I didn't miss like a Liam McNeely commitment or anything like that. Liam McNeely, as of right now, it does not appear to have committed. Yeah. Don't see anything else major. Producer Matt, any other ones? Pats should trade back if they're not taking May. Nate says. Pat's got to take a quarterback. And by the way, I mentioned being wrong on Mac Jones. I don't really know that I was wrong on Mac Jones, and I'll explain why. We'll get back to the NFL draft. It is because when Mac Jones had Josh McDaniels as his offensive coordinator, he made the playoffs. But Bill Belichick, who's never drafted wide receivers well, he didn't let Josh McDaniels go. Josh McDaniels goes to take a head coaching job. He puts Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. By the way, you know where Joe Judge is right now? Joe Judge is an analyst at Ole Miss right now. That shows you how far that guy's fallen. Doesn't give Mac Jones any support, brings in Bill O'Brien, but it's too late. You have no offensive skill guys. So you have to get a quarterback. But I feel so bad because, listen, first pick, Caleb Williams, they're going to do everything they can to put him in position to succeed, and I think he'll be good. Second pick, Washington, whoever it ends up being. Cliff Kingsbury, we can agree, probably not an elite head coach. He's a great play caller, though. He's great when he doesn't have to do everything. And so whoever ends up in Washington is going to be put in position to succeed. Patriots, though, no wide receivers, defensive head coach, defensive culture. I thought they needed to break clear completely of the Belichick era. Instead, they end up doubling down and going with Gerard Mayo. I'm sure Gerard Mayo is going to be a great head coach, but the only thing he's ever known is the Patriot way. And so Belichick might be gone, but the Patriot way isn't gone. I feel bad for whoever ends up being the next quarterback of the New England Patriots. No tools to work with, tough division. Listen, Dolphins are kind of geared up for next year. The Jets are certainly geared up for next year. The Bills are awesome. I know I was critical of them around playoff time, but they are awesome. I think that might be it for hot takes and questions and comments. Do we have anything else, producer Matt? I think that might be it. Tell you what, we've been on air for an hour and a half at this point. These live shows have been so great. They've been such a blessing and a godsend to what we've done. Love taking questions. I think we will get out of here though. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure to subscribe. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars on Apple. By the way, if you're not subscribed on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to hit those notifications. We're going live all the time, pumping out clips, all that good stuff. Like I said, we'll do a show Thursday into Friday. I do have family in town, so we won't be able to react live to the NFL draft. I apologize about that. But hopefully something good happens where we'll put on a good show on Thursday before the draft, because I know all you're going to want to talk draft. Time for me to get out of here. Appreciate everybody's support. I will be back on Thursday. By the way, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube because, if Liam McNeely commits, if Kentucky gets a commit, if Arkansas we're going to be talking about all of it. We'll post all these clips and all that good stuff. Time for me to go. Appreciate everybody's support. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. I'll be back later this week, Thursday night, and maybe tomorrow if something crazy happens.